Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to SciFriday.
It's the end of the week. That means time for... Welcome to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we are continuing our tour of Israel and Jordan.
Yes. This is from our 2019 tour. This is an opportunity to share with you what we saw as a way of perhaps helping you to decide if a tour of Israel is something that you would like to do someday, but also just to share the information with you, because what we learn on these tours has really been important research.
It's been life-changing. It really, really has. It's changed our research, everything that it's helped us to understand the Bible better, and we're not alone. Many of the people who go with us say the same thing. So this is our way of giving you an absolute gift. You don't have to pay for any of this because our programs, of course, are free. If you can't afford to buy a DVD, you can't afford to stream it, and you can't afford to go, here we go.
Yeah.
And the reason we're putting on both Unraveling Revelation and SciFriday is just in case the audiences don't overlap.
You can see all of these in the archives at our website, scifriday.tv, gilberthouse.org, or get the mobile app. It's absolutely free, available for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. It's also on Roku and Apple TV, and all of these programs will be archived there. The best part is that they are available and bypassing the gatekeepers of big tech, and B, the company that produces the app, all of the variants of this app is a Christian company.
It's a Christian company. They provide the storage. They host everything there. They write the code, and their prices for us and for almost all ministries, they're extremely reasonable. This is their ministry.
Yeah. And we truly appreciate their customer service. So we'd like to plug the app. Again, it's free to use, so do take advantage of that and just start browsing through the archives. Get you all of our content. This program, Unraveling Revelation, my weekly podcast, our weekly Bible study, probably the most important thing.
Classic PID radio.
And classic podcast interviews that go back to 2005, which is what got us into all of this in the first place. Well, this week, this is very timely, as just within the last few weeks, 5 red heifers were delivered to Israel from the state of Texas.
This is probably old news by the time you're watching this, but we learned this in September, and of course in September we had Rosh Hashanah. But we are recording this several weeks in advance, so it's hard to say what might be going on right now, so it's not that we don't know it, it's just we don't know it.
Yeah, we're trying to work ahead, build a backlog of programs, but that's something that we as Christians, the red heifer is involved, required for a rabbinical ritual, purification ritual. Because right now, the priests have not been ritually pure since the Second Temple was destroyed. So for almost 2,000 years, they're looking for the red heifer that can be, according to Numbers 19, sacrificed and used to purify the ground and the priesthood for temple service. Now, as Christians, we know that's not necessary for our Messiah to return, but it is believed by some Jews looking for the first coming of their Messiah. The Messiah is returning, of course. Anyway, it's a milepost, a mile marker on the road toward the end of the age.
It's a sign.
It is.
That they believe that's a sign that Messiah is on his way. And in fact, many of them say he's already here. So we will talk more about that on another program. But right now, more Israel.
Yes, the Temple Mount.
It's sometimes said as a joke, but it's really true. You can't dig anywhere in Israel without hitting archaeology. They've just uncovered a 6,000-year-old city north of Tel Aviv because they're building a new road junction. But they're all the time running into the same issue in Jerusalem. Anytime somebody tries to dig a garden, they're digging up bits of pottery and other stuff. And we always find it fascinating to go into the city of David, and especially down into the tunnels alongside the Western Wall. Recently, a new discovery of a road that was used by pilgrims to come to Jerusalem to bring tithes and offerings to attend the festivals was discovered. That's always a political hot potato when you're digging underneath the Temple Mount, underneath the city of David. There are people out there who don't like demonstrate any connection between the Jews and the Temple Mount.
No, not at all. And it's quite an experience to walk through these tunnels. They're the tunnels of Hezekiah, and it gives you an idea of, first of all, what it was like for them to construct it. That they actually met in the middle. Mm-hmm. Still amazes me. How do you know what direction you are digging when you're underground?
Not like you can orient with the stars.
No. So it's possible that they had some sort of compass, but they did meet in the middle, and you can walk through these tunnels today. They are now nicely lit for you, but back in the day you would have had to carry a torch through, which would have made them really, really creepy because you would have only had that tiny light around you. Now imagine being in a large group and using these to escape.
We're in the tunnels underneath the Western Wall here in Jerusalem. We've seen some amazing sights here. Huge, huge stones in the foundation of the Western Wall, as big as, well, we measured it last year at estimated about 75 feet long, about 8 feet tall, and probably 4 feet deep, the largest of the stones. Here now we're entering the watercourse, the Hasmoneans, underneath the city. It's an amazing thing, and seeing what's been built under here now, including a synagogue and, of course, stations for tour guides, is just amazing. It's an amazing combination of the modern and the very, very old, the very ancient.
Well, after we got through the tunnels, you're hearing paper rattling because I'm turning my paper over, my notes. Zev and Carl had a conversation with people from the Temple Institute at about the same time that the rest of us were going through the demonstration and the film at the Temple Institute itself. We learned a lot about the politics behind the Temple Institute.
Yes. The construction of the third temple is not the goal. It's really the means by which well-meaning Christians in the West and in China are persuaded to donate.
It was a learning experience.
It was. And what Rabbi Zev says, I think, makes a lot of sense. The average Israeli, religious or non-religious, really doesn't want a third temple. They said, look, we don't do that anymore. That's why we have synagogues. Mm-hmm. And we know that if a third temple were to be built, it would be World War III, and we would just rather live in peace.
It would require sacrifices to be reinstated.
Yes.
And right now, the mention of doing a sacrifice during Passover causes major political upheaval.
Right.
This pretty much wrapped up our time in Israel. So we had our farewell dinner, which is always filled with joy, and we all reminisce and we share pictures back and forth, and we thank our guides, and of course we thank Aaron Lipkin, because the next day we all go to our homes or to Jordan.
Yes.
This year, the tour extension was into Jordan, and our very first stop, once we made it through the customs, and trust me, it takes a while to go through those customs, but it's worth it, we went to Mount Nebo.
This is an amazing place, not only because this is where Moses got his only look at the Holy Land, but because this year we had learned since our tour in 2018 that there's a specific site visible from Mount Nebo that is very important to this whole narrative.
Absolutely. But before we get to that, I want you to explain what the name Nebo means.
It's a reference to the Mesopotamian god of wisdom, Nabu. Not quite sure why that place, that mountain, was given that name, because there's, as far as I know, no documentation that he was ever worshipped that far west. This was an entity that was pretty much worshipped by the Eastern Amorites, people in Babylon and thereabouts. In fact, Nabonidus, Nebuchadnezzar,
yes, exactly,
Nebuzaradan, others have that name as the theophoric element in their names, the god name as part of their name. So he was an important entity.
He is the son of Marduk.
Okay, the son of Marduk, who was the chief god of the city of Babylon and the king of the pantheon of the Eastern Amorites.
Exactly. So again, we have the Lord taking back territory. He is going directly to the homes of these gods, going to their mounts of assembly, and taking it back and claiming it as his own, because the entire earth is his.
Yes. The valley below Mount Nebo was the plains of Moab, where the Israelites camped after defeating Og of Bashan in the north.
So we go from Gilgal Rephaim, in a way, to where you and I were with our group near Petra.
Right, and this is significant because this area east of the Jordan River was occupied by tribes identified as Rephaim in the days of Abraham. These areas were known to be occupied by those Rephaim tribes, and by the time of Moses, The Rephaim were considered the spirits of the mighty men who were of old, the dead kings. They were venerated by the Canaanites around ancient Israel, and even the Israelites were drawn into this worship when they were on the plains of Moab. That's why God sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites. They were worshiping the Baal of Peor, who I showed in last Clash of the Titans was a god of the underworld. Well, Ezekiel in chapter 39, in his prophecy of the war of Gog and Magog, has it revealed to him by God that the valley of the travelers east of the sea is where God will bury the hordes of Magog. The travelers in that context are the spirits of the dead, the spirits of the Rephaim who cross over. They travel from one plane of existence to another. They are referred to specifically as travelers in Canaanite texts called the Rephaim texts. Those are from about the time of the Judges in the ancient kingdom of Ugarit.
And when you say travelers, you're talking about the Avarim.
Yes. And Avarim is also the name applied to Mount Nebo. God told Moses, climb this mountain of the Avarim, climb this mountain of the travelers. This is significant because from Mount Nebo, the mountain of the travelers, you can see the valley of the travelers below where this end times war of Gog and Magog, the Battle of Armageddon, the church...
The Har Moed.
Yes, God's Mount of Assembly. You see the whole world coming against Jerusalem.
And possibly humans that are inhabited by demons.
Exactly right. And that's why the travelers, who in those Rephaim texts are called warriors of Baal, will be there at that battlefield and they will be destroyed. God says it will block the travelers. At the last trump, we are raised incorruptible. We are resurrected into new bodies. They will be blocked.
Yes, they will not rise. The other interesting thing, you mentioned the snakes. The other interesting thing about Mount Nebo is that very large sculpture, which dominates that area. It's sometimes referred to as Nehushtan. That's another name given to Dumuzi.
Really? Dumuzi or Tammuz in the Bible?
Yes. There is a poem where when he is taken, seized, when Inanna rises from Hades, when she comes back from Tartarus, the underworld, she has to find someone to take her place. She finds the whole world crying and weeping because she is dead, quote unquote. And by the way, she arose after 3 days. She finds her husband, Dumuzi, the shepherd king, sitting on her throne and doesn't seem at all sad. In fact, he's wearing all of her royal robes and crown and the whole getup. He's happy. Until she says to the demons who followed her out of the underworld, okay, take him. Take him. And there is one poem that says that he pleads to have his feet and hands turned into that of a snake. Now, the word that snakes don't have feet and hands. I believe he was asking to be turned into a dragon. Ah, yes. Nehushtan is a flying, fiery serpent. A phrase we see in the Bible. It's a dragon. Nachashim seraphim. Yes, because it's based on that idea of serpent, the Tan part, and also the Nakash. Fascinating stuff that's still there on the summit of Mount Nebo.
Well, we, of course, as you saw, we had the farewell dinner, and then those of us who continued on to Jordan made the trek across the river. And over there, we see some very interesting things. And this is why you want to take the 3-day Jordan extension. We'll show you what we saw in Jordan next on SciFriday. Israel is ground zero in the long supernatural war in which we all play a part. And during the month of October, our special offer helps you to better understand that war and the land of Israel. Our 2 nonfiction books, Veneration, about the ancient cult of the dead and the way it drew Israel in, and Giants, Gods, and Dragons, about the strange and mysterious creatures that God declares are real. Plus the DVD of our tour of Israel from 2018 that takes you to these key battleground sites from Mount Hermon to the Mount of Olives, Mount Nebo to the Temple Mount, and then on to the mysterious island of Sardinia, where we explored the tombs of the giants, a 6,000-year-old stone ziggurat, and the Tophet, used by the ancient Phoenicians to sacrifice children to the dark god Molech. Bought separately, this package is worth $60, but during the month of October, we're making it available to you for just $35 plus shipping and handling. Our October special, available only at our online store. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/store. And again, thank you for your prayers and your support. Welcome back to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we're delighted to be here in Studio G1. We went to Jordan a couple of times now, and I want to go back.
Yes.
I'd like to spend several days there, but we don't get that much time.
There's a lot of biblical history that occurred east of the Jordan River, and of course, one of the most significant was Moses getting his only look at the Promised Land from Mount Nebo.
Well, the other interesting thing about Mount Nebo, yes, was an archaeological site that we only learned about after last year's tour. And this is a site that's been excavated by Trinity Southwest University under the direction of Dr. Stephen Collins for the last 15 seasons. And that is called Tal El Hammam.
Because the evidence is very good that is the site of biblical Sodom. Biblical Sodom destroyed roughly 1750 to 1800 BC when Abraham was here in the Holy Land. Because we see the well-watered plain behind us, the green area there, that was what Lot saw when he looked up. Looked toward the east. Looking up means looking toward the east, saw that the area was good, fertile, well-watered. That's the area he chose. And Sodom, as Wael pointed out, is on that hill that overlooks the valley. It controls the valley. In that period of history, that was the most important city in the Levant, which is Syria, Lebanon, Canaan, Palestine, Israel. That is the Levant. It was the most important city south of Hatzor, which is near the Sea of Galilee. It was important enough that kings came all the way from modern-day Iran, Persia. The king of Elam led the coalition that crossed Mesopotamia, came down from the north to attack that city there. It was important. And remember, on their way down, they had to defeat tribes identified as Rephaim. So in the days of Abraham, the Rephaim still occupied the Jordan River Valley. By the time Moses and the Israelites arrived, more than 200 years later, only Og of Bashan, the Golan Heights, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. And I believe that's why he was the first target. Numbers 25, verse 1, when Israel lived in Shittim, down here, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor. Peor, I explained in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, is based on a root that means cleft or gap or opening. In the context of the spirits of the dead, probably means entrance to the netherworld, a god of the dead. They yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, lord of the opening to the underworld, and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. That's what made God angry. They provoked the Lord to anger with their deeds, and a plague broke out among them. And the book of Numbers says 24,000 died because of this plague. Now, two other interesting things here. Ruins of the Travelers. When I interviewed the scientific director for the dig at Tal El Hammam, Sodom, he said that there are more dolmens gathered around the base of the city than anywhere else in the Jordan River Valley. And the Jordan Valley, the east side, Rephaim territory, has more dolmens concentrated than anywhere else on earth. There are 500 still standing down there. He said there used to be 1,500. I asked him, how are they oriented? Are they oriented according to the stars, north, south, constellation, equinox, solstice? He said, no, we think they're all oriented to face what we believe is the temple in Sodom. What was worshipped? Who was worshipped there? Why was Yahweh provoked to destroy that city? It was more than just going after strange flesh. And when Moses and the Israelites arrived here around 1400 BC, some 300 years, 400 years after the destruction of the city, they saw the ruins up on the hill and 1,500 dolmens, funerary monuments, 2 big slabs of stone with a slab across the top, left behind. The ruins of the travelers. And Moses and the Israelites looked up and saw that, and so named the place. I believe it's down here. And I think there's one final note. Oh yes, this is just an interesting, Sharon pointed this out once. There's the interesting reference in Jude, where Jude references, of course, the angels who kept not their first estate, did not remain within their position of authority, left their proper dwelling, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities likewise indulged in sexual immorality. He says, for some reason the screen is going dark, I guess it's overheating. In like manner, these people also, referring to people in the first century now who were disobedient, relying on their dreams, defile the flesh, reject authority, and blaspheme the glorious ones. But when the archangel Michael, contending with the devil, was disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." He was disputing for the body of Moses. We know from the Old Testament that Moses was buried somewhere in the plains of Moab, but the grave has not been found. Even in the times of the Old Testament, no one knew where it was. But the interesting thing, and this was such a brilliant observation, did Satan believe that he had a right to the body of Moses because Moses was buried in the valley of the travelers east of the sea, the valley of the spirits of the Rephaim?
A fascinating thing that, again, ties together our search for the Rephaim to the battle for God's holy mountain.
The other interesting thing about the behavior in Sodom, it was very similar to the behavior of the acolytes listed in the poetry for Inanna.
Transvestites, transgender.
They were almost omnivores when it came to sex. Omnisexual.
Breaking down all of the barriers, the taboos that God established with Moses on Sinai.
Because that was the way that the Titans, the kings of old, the Rephaim, behaved. Remember in the Bible that we are told the dimensions of Og's bed. That's not his bed where he slept. That was a ritualistic sex rite bed.
Yes.
For behaving in the same way that the Titans, the gods of old, the Rephaim, behaved. This was a way to incubate the god.
We know this from a text found at the Entemenanke, which is Marduk's temple in ancient Babylon, that the dimensions of the bed of Og were exactly the same, 4 cubits by 6 cubits. So Og wasn't necessarily a physical giant, but Moses was connecting him to the wicked occult system of Babylon.
Exactly. And so we have that same activity taking place in Sodom. They were trying to essentially rebuild Babylon by their behavior.
Oh.
And Og may have been trying to do something similar.
You know, that might also have been one of the reasons that the kings felt compelled to march all the way from Mesopotamia to put down this upstart kingdom just east of the Dead Sea.
Exactly, because we don't want his God outdoing our gods.
Yeah. And they've made alliances with these Rephaim tribes along the King's Highway, interrupting the flow of trade between Egypt and Mesopotamia as well. But if this timing is correct, about 1750 BC, the give or take, then that means that Amraphel of Shinar might actually have been Hammurabi the Great.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Because he wanted to make Babylon great again.
Exactly. Yes. Well, who knew that when we stood on Mount Nebo, we would be perceiving all of this? But we were looking at what Moses saw. And here's another interesting thing about that. The transfiguration, which took place on Mount Hermon, another one of the enemy's strongholds, it's where the watchers came down. When Jesus transfigured there, he had 2 individuals with him that essentially had been resurrected.
Elijah and Moses.
Exactly. So he was signaling to Satan and everybody else, Moses, who's buried somewhere there, and you think you've got control of his body, guess what? You don't. He's coming back, but you're not.
Exactly. You're still dead.
You're still dead.
We're here at Wadi Rum in Jordan, which is the Red Desert. It's a place that looks like a lunar landscape or a Martian landscape, which is appropriate because the film The Martian was filmed here, as well as a number of other Hollywood productions. In fact, one film just opening very recently. It is eye-opening when you consider that this is probably similar to what Moses and the Israelites had to see for 40 years as they wandered in the desert. It's not surprising that they began to complain after a very short while when you see the arid landscape that we'll experience here in just a few minutes.
The tour through Wadi Rum, the Jeep drive through the desert, was well worth seeing. Historically speaking, it gives you an appreciation of why the Israelites might have complained about their time in the desert, because really there's not much there.
It's sort of like being on Mars.
Which Hollywood is taking advantage of for several major film productions. We could just colorize everything, or now let's just go shoot it in Jordan. We don't have to colorize it much. It does look like Mars.
It's red. It's why the area is called Edom.
Right. We had a lot of fun there. It was fascinating for me. I've seen it last year. You didn't make the tour into the desert last year, but this year you did. And because your Red Wing Saga series will eventually take one of your protagonists into that part of the world, because that's where T.E. Lawrence of Arabia,
yes, exactly,
rallied the Arab tribes against the Ottoman Empire.
Exactly. And of course, I'll have one of my future heroes working with Lawrence of Arabia, because he also represented the Palestine Exploration Fund.
Yes. Archaeologists who just happened to report back to the military.
And the Foreign Office.
But while we were there, we did get to experience Bedouin tea.
It was delicious.
Oh, flavored with cardamom and other spices. Delicious.
Yes, and the amazing Taylor Joseph, who did most of the film work in this documentary. He got to have his own personal hat.
Oh, yeah. Our tour guide on the Jordan side, YL, fitted him out. And this was absolutely perfect. Taylor looked really good in it, too.
You know what? It suits him.
It does. We brought one home for Tom Horn. We haven't seen him wear it yet. I wonder why.
We haven't. I'm really disappointed in that. We also took one to our friend Juan when we were touring the UK, and he did wear his. He looked great in it.
Yes, not bad for a Scottish Spaniard.
I know. We had a lot of fun while we were there. And by the way, when we were in Wadi Rum, this really surprised me. A couple of things did. First of all, one, I was a little surprised to see that the Bedouins all had cell phones. In fact, there was a little charging station.
Yes.
Set carved into the rock.
So it seemed.
But you also saw petroglyphs that I think must be very, very old.
That area was heavily traveled by the nomads back in the day. Our 2020 tour of Israel will include a visit to the Negev, which is the desert south of Israel, and we'll see some of the sites there, which date back to the Chalcolithic, but also Nabatean sites as well. A lot of people travel through that area. Even as desolate and arid as it is, that area has been occupied for millennia.
Well, not only Mount Nebo, but the site of ancient Sodom.
I know. We didn't know that in 2018, but we found it out the next year. And boy, since then we have worked with those archaeologists to try to squeeze every bit of information out of them. There's a lot there.
There is. Of course, Wadi Rum is a fascinating location there. The Red Desert. Just imagine spending 40 years amongst that landscape. You can see why the Israelites grumbled.
Yes, it's very harsh down there. But we have air-conditioned buses, and you trust me, you'll love it. In fact, you'll discover that hot tea cools you off.
Yeah, as does that really cool hat that Taylor Joseph, our friend, wore. Yeah. He looked like he was made for that hat.
He really did, didn't he?
Well, it's an amazing site. I know I use that word a lot, and you'll see that a lot in the video. I tend to overuse that word, but it's not inaccurate. You can find out more about our 2023 tour of Israel at gilberthouse.org/travel. It is a rolling conference that makes the spiritual warfare described in the Bible come alive for you. Find out more at our website, and we continue the series next week on SciFriday.
SciFriday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at scifriday.tv and gilberthouse.org. That's where you'll find our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. Join us each week as we go through the Bible verse by verse in chronological order. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.